up, beautiful souls? Shout out to Transcendence Mental Health. We are putting on monthly retreats. And for those people who might feel called to experience the multi-dimensional wisdom, unconditional love, and safety of their own soul in a retreat setting, we are facilitating what is called the Heart Protocol. For me, it's been a revolutionary experience which has catalyzed me onto my highest timeline. It has helped me remember who I am, and it has given me a mission upgrade. And we're seeing what Western science calls miracles quite often, but it's actually science. So if you feel called to experience the multidimensional wisdom, unconditional love, and safety of your own soul, we invite you to our next retreat. Check out www.transcendencementalhealth.com. Click begin your journey to book a 15-minute free exploratory call with one of our team members to see if you're a right fit for the Heart Protocol. Shout out to Practical Peptides. If you guys haven't heard about the magic of peptides, check it out. Personally, it's helping so many people, and we're seeing people who are on semaglutide are literally losing approximately 15% of their body weight in a safe way with peptides, which mimic the natural signals of the body. It helps improve insulin levels, helps your blood sugar, helps you lose weight. Also sometimes can help you decrease inflammation. But most importantly, what I'm seeing is a lot of the testimonials are saying it's boosting their self-esteem. And so if you feel called to experience peptides, one of my favorites sometimes I inject is NAD. So NAD is a new medicine which can help decrease brain inflammation, can help heal the gut. But most importantly, I like to use it to increase my energy at the beginning of the day. And one of our intentions is to help each and every single person have the tools necessary to live their best life. So check out www.practicalpeptides.com. We're going to continuously expand our offerings of peptides, and use code Dr. Lee for 10% off. Peace. On to the episode. Let's go. What's up, beautiful souls? Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual Psychiatrist Podcast. Today, I'm honored to have a world-renowned author and spiritual mystic and intellectual, a brilliant mind here on earth, Mr. Daniel Pinchbeck. Welcome to the show, my brother.
Thank you, Dr. Sam. Great to be here. I've been hearing so many wonderful things about you. It's exciting to that you extended this invite.
Yeah, I'm happy. I've heard amazing things about you as well. My brother Amir he told me he met you, and happy to have this conversation, man. So you've written several books, and one of them that caught my eye was the Return of Quetzalcoatl.
Yeah.
And I know Quetzalcoatl has been some like a very mysterious lineage. I was hoping to dive into this topic a little bit and see kind of what your perspective on Quetzalcoatl is.
Yeah, absolutely. So that book was originally published as 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl. My first book came out in like 2002, and that was a book on psychedelic shamanism called Breaking Open the Head. And when that book came out, I really had the field almost to myself. Nobody was even talking about or writing about psychedelics, particularly on the East Coast. So when I wrote that book, I went through like the Iboga initiation in Africa, and I visited the Sequoia tribe in Ecuador for ayahuasca, the Mazatecs in Mexico for mushrooms, and so on. And started out as kind of a skeptic, more or less a materialist, but I had all these incredible kind of psychic and paranormal experiences, which basically converted me more to like a Jungian or shamanic worldview. Mm-hmm. And then I began to realize that we had underestimated the value of indigenous knowledge, indigenous cultures, and that some of these cultures had developed into these incredibly advanced societies and civilizations at different points in their history, like the Mesoamerican cultures, the classical Mayan civilization, the Aztecs. So then I also began to realize that a lot of these indigenous cultures had prophecies or had a whole prophetic way of understanding time and development and evolution and so on. And particularly the Mesoamerican cultures had a deity that they talked about as a feathered serpent deity. I think the Mayan word is Kukulkan, and the Aztec world is Quetzalcoatl. And so Quetzalcoatl is literally kind of the Quetzal bird, which has these bright rainbow-colored feathers, kind of like a parrot, and Coatl is the serpent. So, it's a feathered serpent, it's the meeting of the bird and the snake. The bird symbolizes the air and the sky and the heavens and the spirit. The snake is the matter and the earth and, what crawls on the ground and so on. So that way it's an integration. It's a symbol of integration, let's say, of heaven and earth or spirit and matter. And as well as them having all sorts of particular myths and legends around Quetzalcoatl, which I can share some of if you're interested in those. But but there was this idea that Quetzalcoatl had these different kind of manifestations. There was like a divine manifestation as a creator god, and then there was also a human manifestation. I think it was back in maybe the 10th, 11th century. In every sort of like a scenario, there was a kind of a loss, kind of like King Arthur, kind of like the King Arthur's return, like the idea that Quetzalcoatl had, in the human story, had been tricked by his nemesis, Tezcatlipoca, who was another deity who represented like black magic and the smoking mirror. So Quetzalcoatl had been given drugs and alcohol by Tezcatlipoca. He'd been tricked into sleeping with his sister, and then he was banished from the kingdom. So he left on a canoe onto the ocean. But the legends are that someday he comes back and he restores order and brings together heaven and earth and so on. So that was the return of Quetzalcoatl would be this kind of redemptive reconnection between spirit and matter, ushering in sort of like a new, time for humanity, a new expression.
Amazing. And, I think the 2012 was such a big year on many different levels for certain types of people. And so since you wrote that book in 2012, how do you see that spirit and that matter merging and kind of like where we're at? Because I know one of the few projects that you also are kind of currently in tune with is the future of human consciousness. So using that kind of as a bridge, the merging of spirit and matter, since that you wrote that book, it sounds like you really delved into it and you went into the indigenous and you tried, all of the different indigenous medicines, and then you wrote the book. Where do you feel like we're at kind of right now in human consciousness since you wrote that book and the merging of spirit and matter and bringing heaven to earth?
That's obviously a huge question. Thank you. I kind of look at things in different ways. Like I try to understand, like, what is it I actually know from experience and what's like, does evidence suggest is like probable? Then the things that are more like speculative or theoretical. And I think a lot of times people in the New Age world are confusing because they don't make clear distinctions maybe between these things. Having had so many kind of like paranormal and psychic and supernatural and telepathic kind of experiences, like that for me is like proven ground. Like there's a lot of other dimensions to human consciousness and human experience than like modern civilization, allows for. And so I tend to think that, ultimately, like we've had a very reductive, empirical scientific method, which, was also kind of necessary in a way. We've discovered a lot of things about the world and, atoms and organs, cells and all that stuff and microorganisms and so on. But maybe there's like another stage of development of human knowledge, where we go deeper into the psychic, and really that becomes part of like the next frontier of human development and discovery. So I don't know, in a sense, like where we're going from here, at least in the short term. I'm concerned about the acceleration of the ecological crisis, leading to a collapse of human civilization or even our physical extinction as a species. I see that as a legitimate, threat and possibility. And then also on that, we're compounding other threats like AI going rogue or, Vladimir Putin, discovering that he has indigestion and deciding to wipe out humanity in nuclear war just for fun. We really don't know. It feels like we're teetering on this like very strange knife edge. So for me, it's like looking at different ways of approaching what's happening. And one articulation that I found quite fascinating came from a Toltec shaman, Sergio Magana, who wrote a book called the Dawn of the Age of the Fifth Sun, of the Sixth Sun. Sorry. And he argues that in the Toltec cosmology, there's this kind of interplay between these different ages. So for the last 5,000 100-ish years, we've been in the age of the fifth sun, and that, from the Toltec perspective, is a sun of light. So it's a time when like the rational, waking clarity, empiricism, those are like the most important qualities of consciousness that humanity is kind of like studying and pursuing. As we go into the sixth sun, we go into what Magana calls a sun of darkness. And what that actually means is it's no longer so much about the waking world, it's more about the world of the dream and the psyche. And reality in itself becomes more and more dreamlike, and in that way more and more malleable, but also kind of unpredictable, and kind of as in a dream. Like, if in a dream, if you just think about something, it happens. So things can manifest a lot quicker, and I feel we're seeing that being like reflected back at us with our technology, right? Like AI, which can delude us in all these different directions or feed our delusions, or soon we'll have, AI has just discovered 20 million new proteins and 150,000 new psychedelics. So we're getting this like massive expansion of kind of the material realm, and also expansion of our capacity to, change, manipulate, distort what's happening. So that all seems to be like we're entering this more like dreamlike reality that the Toltecs kind of foresaw. So, I do think that the psychedelic movement for me is an aspect of a larger process of a kind of potential awakening, where we realize that it's not just about exploring the capacity of the physical world. I mean, we could go to Mars and create just as boring a society, as we have in, Houston or Michigan or something. Or we could understand that, like, what's the most interesting frontier for investigation and exploration is actually deeper into the layers of the psychocosmos, and maybe shift in a whole different direction in terms of what we think is important for our evolution.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's beautiful. We're entering to the time of the sixth sun, according to that perspective, the indigenous perspective, as well as some people might call it the golden age, the new era, where we're exploring more and more of the psyche or the soul. And it sounds like, brother, you've had a lot of journeys sounds like you might have tried a lot of different indigenous medicines and explored that realm quite a bit. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your experiences with psychedelics? And I know you said in 2012 you're more of like a very intellectual, but then, like, how has this kind of transformed your understanding of consciousness? And what do you feel like from your experience? How might psychedelics be able to help kind of this new time of the sixth sun and humanity that we're in right now to expand consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot, to unpack there. Once again, thanks for the question. I mean, I guess my first big experience was going to kind of the Gabon in Africa, and doing an initiation Bwiti tribe into Iboga, which is a very long-lasting substance. It can last like 20, 25 hours. And it tends to be very directed. It definitely feels like there's a guiding intelligence, like in that plant material, that wants you to look at a lot of your patterns. It has very distinct phases that the shamans know about. So there was like an eyes open phase in the beginning, where they had me sit in front of a mirror, and I saw different scenes in the mirror, and I saw kind of open eye hallucination, which for me is very rare, of a wooden statue, or sort of like a wooden figure made of rough wood walking across the room, and sort of sitting next to the shaman, or the Nganga, I guess is their word, peering out at me, which they later said was the spirit of Iboga, who comes out in the beginning of the ceremony to sort of open the gates and start the dialogue in a way. But then it showed me a lot of it was lying down and very psychoanalytic, being shown kind of like scenes from early childhood, like patterns, like things that how those had then led to, patterns with drinking and alcohol and so on. And that I did have the capacity to, address all of that if I could find the willpower to change and so on. But then, yeah, I mean, there were many, many different experiences. I mean, smoking an NDMT and going into a completely hyperdimensional reality, 5-MeO DMT, and that experience of kind of complete ego dissolution into like void or nirvana. working with ayahuasca over and over again. I mean, the sort of culmination of the 2012 book was an experience that started when I was working with the Santo Daime, which is a religion that uses ayahuasca as a sacrament in Brazil, where a voice started to speak in my head that seemed very separate from my normal voice, that announced itself as being the voice of Quetzalcoatl, this Mesoamerican deity. And then over the course of like a week, whether in ceremony or in like dreams or just during the day, started to like dictate a transmission of a prophecy that I included in the book. And that was a very startling experience. It wasn't something that I believed in or thought was possible. And so, when I wrote the first version of the book, I was still very like kind of attached to that experience. And I had to go through a whole process of like rewriting and sort of like recontextualizing, because like we see this as something that happens a lot. It's like the origins of different religions, whether it's like Muhammad, channeling
Daniel,
Angel
can you tell
Gabriel.
us a little bit about the prophecy that Quetzalcoatl wanted to transmit through you?
Sure. I mean, it's in the book. I mean, it's about 3 pages, I guess, but he kind of talked about that we're approaching the end of time, and this is actually the apocalypse for real, in a sense of like the unveiling or the uncovering of everything that's been hidden. And there was kind of a sense that maybe we're sort of reaching the end of the physical plane. There was a thing about prepare the vehicle for your higher selves. You only have a little time left. There's a sense of urgency. There was referencing to different spiritual, religious, and esoteric traditions like Islam and Tibetan Buddhism and so on, as all of them being like different ways of approaching the divine that don't really contradict each other if they're seen properly, stuff like that.
Okay, cool.
And then there's side experiences also with like research chemicals like 2CB or DPT. I mean, I interviewed Sasha Shulgin for the book, so some of those experiences were quite wild, interesting.
How was that? Because like a lot of people talk about Sasha Shulgin, if they don't know, he wrote 2 books, T-Call and P-Call or whatever, and then like he literally like researched psychedelics in a lab with his beloved for years and years and years, and like tried all the different types of psychedelics and wrote books about it. How was that experience? Speaking with Sasha, and anything you want to share from that experience?
Yeah, I mean, that was a long time back. I mean, I really thought he was a great guy. I loved him. I mean, he was very wizardly, bushy eyebrows, white beard, and so on. And it just seemed like both of them seemed to have very open hearts. I mean, they were beloved by the Burning Man psychedelic community back then.
Yeah.
And Sasha, he'd been, I think he even worked for the FDA or the drug. I think he worked for the DEA. Kind of, they would find street drugs they didn't know how to analyze. They would give them over to him. Then sometimes he would discover they were the drugs he'd created, which had gotten out into the wild. So I mean, he was responsible for rediscovering MDMA, which had actually been synthesized in the 1920s, but then kind of shelved. So he discovered it in the late 60s, and that led to the whole rave culture. The 2C family, 2CB, 2CI, 2CT7. Yeah, and then he would bring his friends together every week in California, and they would start with very low doses, and every week they would go up a little bit. So, because a lot of the synthetic psychedelics are very dose sensitive, so you can have a very different experience at like, a small degree more of a substance, But
For sure. Yeah, and like I read an article by Sasha where he was talking about the therapeutic effects of MDMA, and what according to this article, he would love to add 2CB after the MDMA, and he felt that those two were synergistic. And I know that MAPS Canada, it's insane the results that they're getting with MDMA psychotherapy. I don't remember all the numbers, but like a PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, like after like 3, 4, 5 treatment, whatever, one treatment, even like sometimes like 70% of people don't even qualify for PTSD anymore. So the therapeutic potential for MDMA and 2CB. Daniel, can you tell us a little bit more about what you believe the possibilities of MDMA, or your personal experience with MDMA and 2CB?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to mention, it was kind of this response to your last question. I'm also not at this point like I'm a little more, I would say, cautious in some ways about the benefits of psychedelics because I also think they can lead to, some negative outcomes.
Sure,
Like
sure.
with myself, I found that I feel they began to cause some negative effects, so I sort of scaled back.
Hmm.
They can make people more impulsive. They can make people, more believe that, the apocalypse or the golden age is like about to happen at any moment, or you know what I mean. They can make people more impatient in a way. Like they can have, they're called non-specific psychic amplifiers, and so I think one thing that's happening now in like the second or third wave of the psychedelic movement is a little bit more, critical analysis of the sort of dangers, even the more subtle dangers of using these types of substances a lot. Having said that, yeah, I mean, MAPS did a lot of studying, and they got FDA clinical trials on using MDMA with psychotherapy to treat post-traumatic stress disorder. And yeah, I think they were working with particularly populations of veterans from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and they found in initial studies, which have since been challenged. Now their methodology is coming under some challenge. That was something like 70% of people had, very deep remission, from the PTSD, and there was like treatment averse forms of PTSD. And in fact, it was just a little bit of a setback, or a big setback, because Lycos, which was a company created by MAPS, tried to get MDMA and psychotherapy kind of approved through the FDA, and just a few weeks ago, the FDA denied that approval, which is a little bit sad because there were like, millions of dollars spent and many people working many years to get this stuff legalized, and so now they have to kind of step back and try to figure out what the next steps are. But in general, yeah, that does seem to be the trajectory. And what
Daniel, why do you think the FDA 70% potential? And because as a psychiatrist, I spent in LA for 7-10 years. That's unheard of.
Yeah.
To be able to have any medicine that 70% potential, decrease in PTSD symptoms and overall treatment. Why do you think the FDA, from your perspective, denied this study or the approval of MDMA-assisted psychotherapy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think there's a few issues. I mean, a couple of issues are that it was an unusual kind of trajectory because, basically the FDA has never approved kind of a substance that plus psychotherapy. That was MAPS's pitch, was that it's not just MDMA, it's MDMA plus a certain type of psychotherapy that they've defined that has like a male and a female psychotherapist and so on. So that was already a little bit odd for the FDA. And then also MDMA is very non-responsive to traditional double-blind testing. So like if somebody, whether you have MDMA or placebo, you're going to know, pretty much for certain in like 15, 20 minutes. Oops. Which one you have. So that was also, those two things were already difficult for the FDA to handle. But the MAPS had done a lot of work with the FDA to sort of get them, to deal with that. But another problem was there's a magazine called Symposia with a number of academics who've been sort of making a name for themselves as people who are within the psychedelic community, who are kind of very negative about MAPS and about kind of anything that has a taint of kind of psychedelic spirituality. So they actually did a huge amount of work to derail this process, which I think is kind of a disaster. And so, for instance, I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds, but there was like a independent panel was having a 1-hour meeting to decide to look into the protocol before the FDA made its final approval. But this group from Symposia demanded they open that process to a 7 or 8 hour kind of meeting with a lot of public complaints. And so then they stacked the deck with people who have negative perspectives on this. And, it's like, you can make your career and build yourself up by doing something positive, by trying to like create something new, or like Rick Doblin spent his whole life trying to get these things legalized so that more and more people can be helped and healed. or you can make a career for yourself by being somebody super negative and destroying things that other people have spent their lifetimes working on. And that seems to be what's up with symposia. They're kind of like infected by this sort of rabid negativity. It's something that you often find in healing or progressive movements. There are people who come into them like this, like kind of like false friends, and because of their own psychological complexes or because of their own ambitions, they end up being very harmful. So that's my perspective on what happened there.
I see. I see. Yeah. Daniel, man, you've lived quite the life, my brother. Written several books, tried all different types, went to Africa, did a boga. I know recently, more recently, you're working with a group, the Future of Consciousness. I know that a bunch of our mutual friends were just in further, what is it, in Italy. You were in Italy speaking there, right? For a little while?
Yeah, that was
Future
great.
Horizon.
Next one was super fun. They would love you there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, talk to me a little bit about it. You've learned a lot. You've experienced a lot, man. And you've written books. When you look at where human consciousness is right now and all of the experiences that you've had, what wisdom do you want to kind of like, where you at right now? Like, what wisdom for humanity do you have? Like, advice, if you want to say, from all of your experiences?
Wow, I'm going through like a little bit. Thank you for all the nice things you said about my career, my past, all that stuff. But I admit I'm going through a little bit of like kind of hesitation or uncertainty right now. I mean, I've also been very, very worried about the ecological circumstance, and that's like in terms of the evidence, just really going off the charts in terms of how threatened it looks like we are and our ecosystems are, and like we're seeing all over the world, like these like right-wing movements which are forming, I think have to do with the climate change and resources and so on, and migration. It's like I where I live in the East Village, now there are all these like African guys lining up in my corner. They're asylum seekers. They're basically like coming out of countries like the Ivory Coast and Sudan, and somehow getting to South America, then walking for like months or years to get to the Mexican border. And, so it's like, I think that's just the beginning of what we're about to see, where like borders are going to start breaking down and countries are going to start breaking down. And more like developed first world countries are going to be like feeling more and more, kind of need to protect their borders or keep people out or something. So I guess and I guess my hope when I wrote my first books, Breaking Open the Head, and then the 2012 book, was that this sort of psychedelic revelations would in a way lead to people moving towards very compassionate and empathic systems thinking. Because you have this basic revelation of like interdependence, that you're one with nature and the world and the cosmos, and you have a deep responsibility to shelter and protect and help and so on. And also, material trappings, whether it's like private jets or yachts or big mansions, matter less than kind of karmic debts and kind of like, trying to do things that are good for the people and for the planet and stuff. But I've been a little bit concerned in terms of how the psychedelic movement has gone, that it's ended up, because we live in a culture that has as its main focus kind of the ego and the I, it's very self-centered, that things tend to get kind of distorted towards like the self. So either the entrepreneurial self or the therapeutic self. So it's always about like, how can I use this thing to, actually have more innovation for my tech job or my Wall Street job, or how can I use this thing to deal with my personal sadness or anxiety so I can be more effective and more efficient. So where I feel like the thing got a little stopped compared to what I hoped, when I wrote those books, which came out in like 2002 and 2007, is in this like self-focus, or maybe people extend it to their like little local tribes, as we see at Burning Man, where people have their tribe of like, wealthy, kind of people, or, healers and entrepreneurs and tech people. But I don't see us doing what I more like hoped would have been more like systems level analysis, and then sort of coordinated kind of thinking and then doing around where things are inevitably heading socially and ecologically, unless there's some kind of like intervention from a highly conscious group,
Absolutely, brother. I love that you were able to just kind of break down the both positive and negative perspectives of what's happening with the psychedelic revolution right now. And yeah, most definitely, like when you go deeper into the psychedelic world, you'll see that, yeah, there is these two branches that are starting to rise. And you brought up both of them. Like, and on these psychedelic experiences, oftentimes we can have this, what people call meta, where we realize, and not only do we realize, we feel we are one with nature. We are a part of nature. And if we don't get our shit together, shit's going to go down. And as we enter into this time of the sixth sun, and as we, something called golden age, whatever, the old systems have to break down first in order for new systems to arise. And shit might get worse before it gets better. And so, but this beautiful kind of, I love how you ended it there. Yeah. And if you do go into the psychedelic world right now, you're right. There's a lot of people out there who are, entrepreneurial, egoic, and I'm not condemning that at all. It is what it is. But like, I love how you ended it by saying like, yes, I was hoping that we can kind of find a high level group of entrepreneurs, and not only entrepreneurs, but like global consciousness thinkers who come together, because that's how it all starts really. And with a new system, to develop a new system. But in order to develop that new system, yeah, we can create a new system. Don't fight the system, create a new one. But we also have to get the attention of the people to be able to transfer that consciousness into the new system. And when there is bread in the house of bread, people will come. If people know that, hey, there's a new system and it's based on equality, it's based on holarchy, it's based on abundance, it's based on transparency, that's great. But then we also have to get the attention or the consciousness, because it's collective consciousness that decides what system humanity is running by. So I love that you said that. And I think psychedelics, and it's how you use it. Nothing is good or bad. Nothing is good or bad. It's how you use it. Setting, intention, facilitator, and the energy in the invisible world that we are all bringing into these ceremonies. Yeah, and you're right. If you use it too much, it can lead to kind of like different types of apocalyptic thinking or whatever it is. But like, and I know you're part of this group, Daniel, that's called is it the future of consciousness? Is that what it's called?
It's not a group so much. It's a seminar. It's a course that I'm hosting on my course platform, which is Liminal News, www.liminal.news. And yeah, it goes for about 6 weeks, or about a week, a little more than a week into it. And I'm loving it. I mean, it was really a great opportunity for me to bring together a lot of people I think are like the most important and sometimes underknown thinkers of our time. And I mean, one of my favorite philosophers is this guy, Bernardo Kastrup, who wrote a book called Why Materialism is Baloney. So he was like a scientist at CERN in the physics, kind of thing there. And then he began to somehow question his own, understanding of the nature of reality. And he began to realize that it was much, much more logical to understand, consciousness as the foundational level of reality, and that everything kind of like is a projection emerges from that underlying field of consciousness, rather than to think of it as a material, physical world out of which, consciousness kind of accidentally emerges through biological evolution. So he's like a very good, gives great expression to what's called analytic idealism or monistic idealism, and so I think he's a very important philosopher right now. And we've had about we'll have about 15 or 20 speakers. People can still join. We had Jeffrey Kripal, who wrote a book called The Flip, which is about making this sort of flip from a materialist worldview to realizing that somehow consciousness is deeply embedded in the nature of reality, and psychic and paranormal phenomena are actually part of our human experience. Or my friend David Luke, who's a parapsychologist in the UK, who was also one of the founders of Breaking Convention, which is a wonderful psychedelic conference that happens every 2 years in England. It's my favorite conference on the subject, because they cover so many different topics. And it's Jude Currivan spoke last week. She's a physics trained cosmologist. She talks about kind of the fractal nature of reality and so on. Yeah, so it's been a beautiful, it's an ongoing learning experience. I'm really enjoying it. Yeah.
I love that, man. I'm so happy to hear like the reformed CERN scientists, and I feel like that's going to be such a beautiful thing, man. When a lot of our scientists start experiencing the paranormal and experiencing the supernatural. And it's really cool that you guys got a group of meeting. And can you tell us a little bit more about that, Daniel? You guys are meeting on the future of human consciousness. Is that like a ongoing online seminar that you guys are hosting?
Yeah, it's going to go until early October, maybe. But yeah, I mean, for me, there's like these two main pieces. I mean, one is, well, I guess we're more focusing on, yeah, this idealism, this idea that if enough people kind of anchor this kind of new paradigm that's like consciousness first, you know, or consciousness as the ontological primary or whatever, does that have like some real changes? Because like,
Mm.
materialism and empiricism, which developed over the last 400 years, led to consumerism and materialism in the current world system that we have. So would this analytic idealism, if that caught on and everybody began to realize that it was actually we lived in a consciousness-based reality, would that also change, yeah, like how we relate, what we're interested in, what we buy, what we sell, and so on? So that's one strand. I'm also another strand is what you could call cognitive capitalism, kind of like
Mm.
how cognitive, technology, kind of under a market economy like we have now as it evolves, is having a lot of impacts on the human psyche, and some of them are quite, potentially dangerous or negative. So, for example, the hippocampus is what determines like navigation, spatial memory, and so on, and it tends to develop between the ages of like 10 and 16. So if kids are getting smartphones with GPSs when they're like 8 or 9, they're never going to have that experience, just like getting lost. Like it actually turns out
Mm.
very important for our development to get lost in the forest or the park or the museum, to have to like navigate through like spatial cues and memory. That's actually a very important kind of thing for learning how to think and understand our reality. So if kids are not getting an opportunity to fully develop their hippocampus, it's almost like they'll become permanently crippled. And actually, you'll be able to see it in brain scans, like less gray matter in certain areas of the brain and so on. So then they'll be sort of permanently kind of, in a way, under the dominion of like Apple or Google and these maps and so on, Google mapping and so on. So we're actually changing the whole environment of the physical brain through our technologies, but we're not doing it intentionally. We're not thinking about the long-term consequences, because if young people don't have this sort of spatial memory capacity, that's also linked to memory in general. Like memory tends to be a very spatial phenomenon. So yeah, stuff like that. Or like now with artificial intelligence, we sort of outsource our reasoning capacity. I mean, even I do it now. Like, if I want to understand, what mitochondria is, I'm not going to read a book on cell biology. I'm going to ask ChatGPT, what is mitochondria and how does it operate? So like some of that is good because it allows us to be very sophisticated and get a lot of knowledge really quickly, but some of it is also like we're going to lose the capacity to do that research for ourselves. We're going to get lazier and lazier and give the machines and the robots more and more power over us. And once we've forfeited too much of that power, it's hard to get it back. So that's an area that really interests me. It's like, how do we, confront as a society, recognize the positives of technologies in a way, but also kind of like maybe, ask if maybe kids need to be off the screens more, or maybe, before the ages of 16, you shouldn't even use certain things or whatever, so stuff like that, like the whole, so that's part
Yeah,
of the future of consciousness, or how we have to like orient ourselves towards a better future of consciousness.
cool. Yeah, so I wanted to kind of like also piggyback off that, and it's a good point, right? The human brain and development of consciousness and the shift from materialism to consciousness-based consumerism and things like that. But so, what is your take on, for example, like the emerging neuralink and the potentiality to merge AI with the human brain? What do you see happening there, and any advice that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think to me, it seems like a very bad direction. And I really, I mean, I'm sure that some people are going to go in that direction, but I would not advocate for that for people. Part of it is like, we really don't know, what organic reality has to offer us yet. Like, for instance, if you go to like the, kind of Amazonian traditions with ayahuasca, Like I have a lot of friends who've done a lot of work with the Shipibo. I've done a little work with them where you do these kind of dietas. And, from that perspective, like not only ayahuasca, but there are all these plants that actually have wisdom, and they have a sort of, kind of like, maybe an astral being or astral consciousness that if you go with a devotion and you sit in, for weeks and you only like drink the tincture of that plant and, then drink ayahuasca and then eat like just like a boiled potato every day or two, you can like gain access to like a whole nother layer of consciousness in the cosmos. And yeah, like the Kogi in Colombia or another indigenous group, and they're tuned into the consciousness of like rivers or lakes or crystals or rocks and so on. So my fear is that we're wiring ourselves more and more into a very limited, very binary kind of like tech designed reality, engineer designed reality that may actually be a lot lesser in its greatness and its potential than these sort of unknown dimensions of natural consciousness that we really are now. Like we're just beginning, to even because we've been so locked in this sort of materialist imperialist worldview. We haven't even really been able yet to envision that there might be all these other dimensions and realms of consciousness that are available to us through these other practices. Or you have like, Indo-Tibetan, Tibetan Buddhists like lamas, a lot of good evidence that some of them are able to achieve the rainbow body at death, where their rainbows appear and their bodies like shrink and merge back. They sort of take their physical form with them. I mean, who the hell knows? But yeah, I think that like I'm scared that we're pushing really fast and far in this technological direction, which to me is a very binary and limited. Like, I'm not interested in living in a computer game. I'm interested in living in a multidimensional, etheric and astral cosmos that, where there's like sheaths of spiritual beings and levels of, angelic and even demonic and, elemental beings. Like I think, that's where I would like to see us orient towards. And, it just serves the interests of capital, right? The problem with capitalism is because it's inherently a debt-based system, it has to keep creating new markets. And we've run out of external markets, right? Like it used to be like, if we had a kid, if we had our family, we would like drink from the stream next to our house. Now we have to buy like Evian or bottled water. We used to tell stories around the fire. Now we all watch like Netflix, or we watch shows on Instagram. So capitalism automatically, just by the nature of how it works, takes things that used to just be intrinsically human and takes them away from us and then sells them back to us. And it creates more economic transactions, more GDP. And now that it's, kind of taken everything that it could in the external world, it's actually moving into the brain and into the realms of consciousness. And I find that very threatening, as an example with the hippocampus and the GPS or AI and reasoning or Neuralink, because you can imagine all the new markets that'll be created, for that in the future. So I think we need to go more back into a balance and really go back more into, amazing aspects of a multidimensional organic reality where we could have experiences that we can't even quite imagine quite yet, but indigenous cultures can give us some hints.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely love that. Like coming back into balance and harmony with Mother Earth and organic consciousness of the multidimensional nature of what is already is, if we would just actually learn how to go back to our roots and sit with the beautiful, amazing truth of the creation of Creator. Perhaps that would be shown to be the greatest AI is actually organic creation, perhaps. So beautiful, brother. Any last kind of final words, Daniel, that are coming through that you have? Any message for the viewers here today that you want to share? I actually want to ask you one more thing. Let's say, because you're in New York City, my friend, you walk into the elevator of the, what is it? What is that tall building there? Is it the Empire? What is it? The Empire State?
You do, yeah.
Yeah. And so your 20-year-old version, 20-year-old Daniel Pinchbeck is in the elevator. And then you walk in knowing everything you know with the wisdom you have now. So there's simultaneous selves of your 20-year-old self and you now. and you have one elevator ride up the Empire State Building, and you get a chance, your older self, to whisper some words of wisdom to your younger self, what would you say to your younger self, knowing what you know now?
Wow, that's a super like deep question, and I would have so much to say. But I mean, yeah, I mean, I try not really to have regrets, but there's a lot of things that I wish I'd done very differently,
Hmm.
and I just didn't know. So I think having more patience, kind of
More
like
patience.
life's not a life's not a sprint; it's a marathon. And taking a lot more self-care. I didn't focus on self-care at all, like whether it was like physical training, or every now and then I have
Hmm.
little spurts of getting into like yoga or gym or something like that. But
Hmm.
from where at now, yeah, I wish that I had prioritized self-care, and I wish I'd worked more on myself in different areas
Mm.
when I was younger. Now I'm sort of trying to catch up for all that, but
Yeah.
having more patience, more self-care, maybe more cognizance of certain things. Yeah, I don't know. I can
Yeah.
go on for hours, or I could leave it there.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, patience. That's beautiful, man. More patience and more self-care. Yeah, and this is kind of a weird question, but from all of your experiences, you've written, you're an author, you've published several books, you have a newsletter, and a very, very good following, and you're speaking at these events. And all of humanity, they make songs about love, they write about love, they la, 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 but like from all of your experiences, if I were to ask you, Daniel, like from what is love?
Beautiful question. Yeah, at this last festival I was at in England, Medicine Festival,
Yeah.
there was this wonderful character, Satish Kumar. I definitely
Hmm.
recommend people check him out. But
Hmm.
yeah, there's a lot of lectures by him. He's like 88 years old, Indian guy, but he was saying how you know nature is my country, the whole earth is my nation, and love is my religion.
Mm.
You know, and I'm
Yeah.
like totally felt on board with that. Um, yeah, I mean, and yeah, I would say that like if anything, I feel that my goal right now. Also, there's a teacher that I worked with who's part of this group called ISTA, International School of Temple Arts. Bruce
Yeah.
Lyon.
Yeah.
He has some great videos where he talks about yeah, instead of seeking love, try to be love. I think
Hmm.
love is just yeah, universal compassion, universal kind of like just caring for everyone and everything as an extension of yourself, of that unity, like it can be, it can be kind of exemplified in a certain relationship. Like obviously with your girlfriend or whatever, your partner, you're going to feel like a certain type of, more intensified version of it. But it still should, be out in all directions. Like it should be the shaping force, the guiding force for your life and your intentions. I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, man. And like you pretty much just said the exact same thing after all of Jesus, everything that Jesus lived and whatever, whatever. He said the exact same thing you're saying. That's what it comes down to, is universal compassion. Do unto others as you've done unto me. You know what I mean? And so beautiful, brother. Amazing. Hey, Daniel, for people who want to follow your work and stay up to date with what you're up to, how can they find you, man?
So my newsletter is danielpinchbeck.substack.com. Please follow me there. Yeah, I mean, there's a paid version, but I also put a lot of stuff out for free. And the courses that we do are at www.liminal.news. And that also includes some books, digital downloads, essays. I'm involved with a think tank called The Elevator, and that's theelevator.earth. So you can also sign up there for newsletter and so on. Yeah, I think that's about it, really. And then I'm also on all the normal places: Instagram, Facebook, under my name, Daniel Pinchbeck at Instagram or Facebook.
Cool. And we'll post that under the links for people. Stay up to date. Daniel, in brilliant, intelligent mind here on Earth. And I know this is going to sound a little bit weird. I really mean this when I say, Daniel, thank you, man, for being born on Earth as a human being. Courageous choice. And for you've had a fascinating, fascinating journey so far, man. And I'm looking forward to seeing that the second half of everything that creator is going to bring through you for humanity here, man. Appreciate you, my brother. Thanks for jumping on the podcast today.
Thank you, Samuel. Thank you for your great questions, and look forward to seeing you in New York, I hope, in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely, brother. Look forward to it, man.